So I'm really excited to be joined on the GridCast today by Renene Windsor. Renene brings over 20 years of experience in the energy industry, not just here in Australia, but internationally as well. She's currently in the industry director for transmission and distribution at Oricon, and she's based in Sydney. Renene, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us today. Great to have you here. How are you doing?
Hi, Liam. Thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, kind of jumping straight into things, I guess before we kind of explore your current job with Oricon and your role there and that type of thing, I was interested to kind of find out a little bit more about your career journey and maybe some of the key chapters that have shaped your path through your career to kind of get to where you are today. So you're able to kind of give us a bit of an overview and kind of talk us through that.
Yep, sure. So my career has really always been about combining technical with business and people, I guess. And it's always been in the energy industry as well, both in Australia and overseas. So I'm passionate about the energy transition, and that's why I guess I've spent my whole career in the energy industry and trying to make it more sustainable. Um, I loved maths and physics at school. So I went and did electrical engineering and commerce degrees, but I guess always knew that engineering was what I wanted to do as a focus of my career because I really like that it's a way to be impactful for people and communities. So um,
Yeah.
never looked back, I guess, from that decision.
Yeah.
Careers
Nice.
probably in about two halves. First half was with ABB and later Alstom when Alstom acquired that part of ABB business. So there I had a combination of technical markets and project management roles, but they were always around EPC project delivery.
Yeah.
I started as an electrical engineer in Australia and then pretty quickly, I think it was less than 12 months, I was on site at an outage down in Hazelwood and they called and asked me if I'd like to transfer to the US office in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I said yes. And my parents had to come and pack up my apartment in Sydney and I flew straight to US from there.
No messing around
Um,
there then by the sounds
no
of
messing
things.
around there. Didn't quite know what I was getting myself in for, but had a great time working as a process engineer there. And the markets team looking at all of back end equipment that could be retrofitted to coal fired power stations to capture the NOx, SOx gaseous emissions as well as the particulate emissions. While I was there, that was the time when Alstom acquired that part of ABB. So my manager at the time was offered an opportunity to create a team in the head office in Paris because that part of the business didn't exist in France. So that's how I ended up across into France. And that was the same time as the European Union introduced new regulations where all the coal-fired power stations across the Europe had to be retrofitted with this equipment. So I moved into the operations or delivery team, if you like, in France, and was engineering manager for a project to retrofit two coal-fired power stations in France, one in the south of France and another one in the east, near the border of Germany.
Nice.
So at the end of that project, I decided it was time to move back to Australia. And that's where I kind of did the transition to the second half of my career. And I've been with Oricon for about 14 years since I came back to Australia, in a combination of project management and business roles there. Um, I'm really proud of that time there because we've really gone a long way. If I look at what the energy team is compared to when I joined and the type of work we're doing, we've really come so far in repositioning the team and upskilling and changing it from really being about coal-fired power stations into renewables and that energy transition to renewables. So I spent the recent years particularly focused on transmission and distribution. We had a goal from the start really to establish ourselves as number one for 500 kV because it's been a long time since that was built. The last time was greenfield in Australia, and also to be known for renewable energy zones and the planning and delivery of them. So done a lot of work in that space in the last few years, working originally with New South Wales government and then Energy Co about the planning and now delivery of the renewable energy zones, as well as the large interconnector projects. But yeah, it's really the projects that I love. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was going to ask you about that because you obviously mentioned quite a few projects there. And from what you said, you've kind of seen the evolution of the energy industry in a way with coal-fire power stations into, all this renewables that we're kind of heading into these days and how that's changed over the years. So is there any projects either in the renewable energy sector or, back early in your career that really stand out as projects that you're kind of particularly proud of working on and delivering?
Um, so yeah, there are lots of projects. I'm proud of all my projects.
Yeah.
When I go back to France to visit now, I drag my daughter along and show her the power stations that
Sure, she
I've
loves
worked
that.
on. Yeah. So I'm definitely proud of the project in France, just from a learning and development perspective of how much personal growth, I guess, I had stepping into that sort of leadership and technically challenging role where I had a lot of teams in different countries around Europe to coordinate. A lot of meetings in French, which I had to learn in parallel to doing the job. So personally, very proud about seeing it to the end of that project. Um, but as far as a contribution to the energy transition and the legacy that it will leave, it's
Yep.
really the renewable energy zones, I think, at the moment that are, just starting. Central West Arana, we have we're the lead detail design for that for ACE Res. So being in full swing, have a significantly sized engineering team mobilised on that now, doing all the detail design of that. The scale of that project, complexity, being the first renewable energy zone in Australia, being a PPP, introducing a new network operator. There's lots of firsts in that and setting the way for all the other renewable energy zones. So yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot happening in that space at the moment, and sounds like you're kind of at the forefront, which is exciting. But I guess going back to that France stuff, how is your French these days? Are you still you still able to speak French, or is that kind of lost you?
Yeah, well, I I managed to find a French husband in France and bring him back to
Okay.
Australia, so I've kept the connection there.
Excellent stuff. Good stuff. So I would imagine the French is still pretty much up to scratch then by the sounds of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, yeah. And then in terms of the kind of the draw to the energy sector originally, what kind of drew you in, and what do you think's kind of kept you in the this sector for so many years? Do you think?
So I think what drew me in originally was well, my dad was an electrician, so that probably did help a bit, and worked in the utility where I grew up in rural New South Wales. So there was probably some awareness about it as an industry through
Yep.
that. But we've ended up very different career paths in that. So then it really became about the projects, and I guess that's why I went overseas. Was at that time in Australia, you needed to go overseas if you wanted to work on those large major projects in energy. They were overseas, and really that purpose of trying to make a more sustainable future and source of energy. So, I mean, I got involved with some pretty cool research projects as well when I was in the US with trying to capture CO2 from the back end of gas turbines and things like that as well. So, yeah, a lot of sort of new things in trying to break through and make the energy more
Yeah.
sustainable. Yeah.
The innovations and that type of thing. Sounds like you've been involved in those types of items as well, which always keeps it interesting, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And from what you've said as well, it sounds like you've been very involved through your career in that generation side of energy too. But obviously now you're very much the industry director for T&D. So do you feel like your experience in those areas previously has given you a very holistic view of what you're doing now specific to T&D?
Uh, Yeah, definitely. And I think now if you look at renewable energy zones, it's not just about the transmission, right? It's a system, a network, a zone as it all. And that's, I think, more and more what we're learning as an industry is a lot of the challenges or haven't made it easy for ourselves trying to separate that out and just think of it as the transmission, just think of it as the generators, but it really is a holistic new network, a system effectively that we're building, and it all has to fit together, and there's a lot of interfaces between that.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. And in terms of, moving on to your specific role now as the industry director for T&D at Oricon, what does that entail? Like, what's your kind of day-to-day, week-to-week look like at the moment, and what are some of the kind of main goals that you guys are targeting?
Yeah. So I'm part of the markets team at Oricon. It's a relatively small team, but we're kind of a bit separate to the operations or delivery team, which is where my background and past had been at Oricon.
Right.
And it's really about the external presence and brand and face of Oricon in the market. Also, when we look at these large projects, any of the partnering, if we JV with partners to form parts of teams, or which of the competing consortiums for certain projects we join, and what scope or role we might negotiate to have in those projects. And also the longer term sort of strategic view for Oregon. So like that transition from into being a renewables focused business, and what we need to do in the sense of skill sets and positioning and projects, and how we make those changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So quite a broad role then by the sounds of things that you've got on at the moment.
Yeah, and then just because I love projects and delivery, I keep my hand in that as well. So I'm on the steering committee and form part of that, and the governance teams for all of the major projects in the transmission space, just so that I can stay a part of the delivery and the projects.
Yeah, nice. Keep your ears to the ground and that type of
Yeah.
thing. Good stuff. And as you mentioned, and we both talked about in terms of, mega projects that are happening across Australia in terms of transmission at the moment, whether it be all the reses that are coming up, or, either other projects that are in design or delivery, whether it be, Copper String, Western Renewables Link, Clean Energy Link, VNI West, NWTD, like you've got however many that are kind of
Yeah.
happening at the moment. With the size of those projects and the volume of the projects that are happening at the moment, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges to kind of upgrading Australia's network? What do you think are some of the key problems, challenges that we're going to have either right now or in the coming years?
Yeah, it's definitely it's a journey, and we're on the journey, but we're only really at the start of it as well.
Yeah,
So a lot of those challenges are kind of coming to the forefront, I think, at the moment. In particular, where kind of consider it, there was a first wave of the major projects. So you had HumeLink, Project Energy Connect, Central West Orana. They're sort of all up and running now, either finishing design and into construction. Then we've got this second wave coming, which will include New England RES, VNI West, Western Renewables Link, those on top of it. And that's really going to be a shift, right, for the industry to be able to respond, because it's not, the first wave's not finished. It's going to be cumulative on top of that.
yeah,
AEMO actually issued a draft report, I think it's in the network options report, just last week. And I think it does a really good job of articulating the challenge at the moment, and it's the cost blowouts, which a lot and a large part of that is the project delays. So it's getting really hard for tendering teams, delivering teams to really kind of have any confidence about what's coming on when for the planning of those projects and resources. So it goes, I mean, the challenge that we've been talking quite a bit about for a while now is like the equipment supply chain problems and delays and long lead items. Those things, yes, they're there, but we've worked out ways to work around them. Then you have this sort of this realization that you had all these cumulative projects coming on top of each other and how the market would respond to that. There's been a lot of, teams have grown. Our Oricon's transmission distribution energy teams grown significantly, right, in preparation for that. There are also new entrants into the market as well for that. Resource sort of constrained to be able to respond, but yeah, what hasn't been articulated so well or addressed in the past is this delays and the complexity of the projects linked into the social license and planning approvals and the front end of the projects and getting them to the stage of financial close or shovel ready, if you like that term. So yeah, there's
Yeah. Okay.
a lot of challenges still in that space.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess those delays can kind of impact, especially companies like Oricon that, as you say, they're trying to plan resources, trying to manage all that, ready to hit the ground running when the project gets the green light. But if it's not getting the green light, then what do we do with our people that are ready for the project? So I can understand that from that perspective as well. So yeah, no, that's interesting. And I think not everyone looks to that as the first challenge. There's always other things that people are thinking of, but yeah, that's an important one, I would say. And I guess on the flip side of that, there's everyone likes to talk about challenges, but on the positive side, what are some of the big opportunities that you see either for companies like Oricon or even individuals, professionals, either in the industry or looking to get into the industry? What are some of the big opportunities you think that all this wave of work will bring for companies and people within the industry?
Oh, it's almost limitless, right? Because it's
Yeah.
such a complex problem. There's no one single solution. So yes, you've got to do all these large transmission projects, which will then have all of the generators and renewables connect to. You've got the grid stability and reliability. So you've got all the syncons and other equipment to be added into the system and how it operates. And then you've got such an opportunity on the distribution side as well, right?
Yeah.
And consumer rooftop solar batteries and how that will integrate to what this future network grid is going to look like. So there are so many different places where you can play in the market at the moment and be technically challenged. I think about it is what's exciting too. It's not just taking something that worked here and putting it over here. Everything is an engineering problem, to be solved. So it's a
Yeah,
great time. Yeah,
it's a bit of an engineer's dream at the moment, isn't it,
it
in
is.
terms of trying to figure out all these problems. And but as you say, it's not a one person situation, is it? It's very much a group, and it's not even a one company situation. I think everyone's going to work together to try and figure it all out. So yeah, I think that's kind of being acknowledged at this point in time, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's definitely positive.
And it's
Um,
never really, for someone who spent all their career working in energy, it's never been like a topic at barbecues on the weekend or conversation, where now it's actually people want to know and ask questions and understand
well,
it. So it's a,
yeah, I think what drives that is a lot around the elections that we had and stuff like that, and it was such a hot topic, wasn't it? It was pretty much one of the key things, that, and obviously the cost of living crisis and all that type of stuff were the two big ones. And as you say, it's not always been like that, has it? So it was interesting to see. But yeah, I guess in terms of like the energy industry, specifically transmission and distribution as well, what are the things that probably excite you the most about the industry?
for me, it's the scale and the complexity of the problems. And I love engaging with people and diverse groups of people and problem solving. So it's really about that. So you have such a diverse group of stakeholders on these projects where it's not just about finding the best technical solution. It's really about working with the financiers, working with the network operators, the constructors, the local communities, the environmental planners. Like it's really is such a broad and diverse group of people that you need to work with and together to find a solution. And it's not the same solution for everything, because one of those parameters will change, right, and be
Yeah.
different on each
Yeah.
project. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I love.
Yeah, I guess as you say, you kind of hit roadblocks where things have to change, don't they? Based
Yeah,
on, the different projects and all that type of thing as well.
yeah,
Um, and do you think there's going to be big challenges in linking some of these major projects and red zones and all that type of thing as well?
yeah, yeah. Network planning is definitely the skill. If I had to reinvent myself
Yeah.
as a type of engineer, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, how it all works together is is really a technical challenge, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about obviously when you started at Oricon, the team was in one place and how much it's developed, and you brought through people, and it's a much bigger team now and very focused on that kind of energy transition, T&D, and all that type of thing. If you were a graduate engineer coming into this industry right now, which is obviously a very exciting time to be a grad engineer coming into the industry, what advice would you kind of give those people, relating to the market and, potentially to their career and that type of stuff? Would you steer them in a certain direction in terms of, obviously there's different disciplines they could look at? Would you steer them in? Yeah, what would the advice be that you would give them?
So I do have this conversation with our grads quite regularly at
Right.
work. I start off with they are so lucky because they have these great projects literally in our backyard. When I was a grad, I needed to go overseas to get
Yeah.
this type of experience. So my advice is really just throw yourself in it and learn as much as you can, because whichever of those projects or whatever part of the network that you're involved with, you're going to learn so much at the moment. And yeah, it's challenging, but it's also so rewarding. And I think it's not just the electrical engineers, right? It's also the civil, structural, all the discipline
Yeah.
engineers. Um, there's a lot of opportunity for that. So like your pumped hydro, use so much of the tunneling skills and things. So whereas before, graduates might have been attracted to the mega projects in transport or metro for that, I think you can have you can learn just as much and have just as much opportunity in energy now, which is exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you say, you had to go to the US and France and all that type of thing to get on the exciting projects. But yeah, there's so much happening here, so I can understand that point of view. I guess throughout your career, you've obviously worked for two major companies and find yourself as industry director now, for T&D in a really senior position. So, is there any kind of key pieces of advice that you were given along the way that you kind of recall, that was really important to you from either mentors or other people in the industry along the way?
I have been very lucky in my career looking back, where I had managers who really encouraged me and sometimes pushed me into different roles. It didn't always make sense in the progressions. Like when I moved to the US, I was actually a process applications engineer. All the rest were chemical engineers. I was the only electrical engineer in the team. But yeah, don't don't be too worried. Like if people have confidence and believe you can do it, then back yourself and yeah, and give it a go. So I probably wouldn't have thought I was right for that job. I probably wouldn't have thought I was right for the engineering manager role in France either. But you come with a lot that you can give, and doing it your own way and being authentic to who you are has also been important advice along the way, because quite often I didn't have that many female colleagues along the way,
Yep.
and even now in the more senior roles. So it's like, don't try and be the same as your peers. Just be authentic to who you are and how you would do it to achieve the outcome.
Yep. Yep. No, that's definitely good advice. And it sounds like you had a lot of good advice over the years. So no, that's good. And in terms of I'm always looking at the problems from through my lens, which is obviously talent and how difficult it can be to find people in the industry and that type of thing. And one of the things that I've noticed a lot of, especially with the the rail sector, just use an example of being in a difficult place a little bit in Australia at the moment, but maybe not as
Yeah.
buoyant as it has been over the past few years. I've seen a lot of engineers from that type of space wanting to come over and other industries as well, because they see that, T&D and just energy in general is booming. So on the outside of graduates, what advice would you potentially give to somebody that hasn't got any T&D experience, but has maybe a few years in another industry like rail that is trying to kind of break through? What type of advice would you kind of give somebody like that?
So that there's definitely a lot of transferable skills, right? And that's been a part of us, Oricon's approach to scaling up to this internally. So we have transport teams and infrastructure and rail teams as well. So we have used and actually they've been really helpful, right, and impactful on the energy projects that we have now. So having that large scale DNC experience is something that's really helpful to the energy projects. A lot of the civil structural is transferable as well. So and electrical, we did some work sort of mapping all of the disciplines across, and there are patches where it takes a little bit more of an investment, but it's still possible. But there's probably could be like a 6, 12, 18-month sort of, upskilling training period to come across, whereas others can be immediately across
Yeah.
and work in like your systems assurance and system studies or project management, engineering management, package leads, all those sorts of roles.
Right.
We're leaning heavily on the Oricon's transport team for those roles.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So you kind of literally mapped it role by role to see what the transition time would be for each individual position.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, I've not heard of that in the industry yet. That's quite interesting. I guess with Oricon's, wide team, obviously siloed in terms of divisions, but then it makes sense to try and pick from the other teams that maybe aren't as busy if people are interested in moving across and that type of thing, for sure.
yeah. So I think the same would apply, right? If you're outside of the company where
Yeah.
you could still transfer across. And we're seeing a lot of even on the client side teams, a lot of the project management senior roles coming across from transport background.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that that's a sign of that industry as well. It was really busy in my previous role. I managed a team that not only looked after energy but looked after rail as well and transport and that type of thing. And for years, that industry was buoyant and a big part of our team. But I've seen, speaking to my old colleagues that things have changed a lot in
Yeah.
that space. So yeah, no, it's interesting and I guess great that there's opportunities for those people as well,
Yeah.
that they can have those transferable skills too. In terms of like, disciplines and that type of thing, specifically looking back at T&D now, what disciplines do you think are going to be the most in demand over the next, say, 5 or so years with all these projects coming up? Or the laugh tells me it might be a lot of different ones.
Yeah. So like it's just an overall shortage everywhere for system studies, network, grid
Yeah.
studies people. That's been the case for probably 1, 2 years, right? There's always more work than people in that space. So it's a constant challenge, I guess, of training up new people into that market and that service. Um, Yeah, at the moment, the other one is primary designers.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of that early work, right? You've got to get that primary design, single design layout in that concept feasibility stage for substations. And then transmission lines, it's the tower, yeah, the tower, lattice tower specialists or the like PLS CAD people can do the electrical studies and modeling of the lines.
Yeah. Yeah, these are all the types of roles that
Yeah.
yeah, very, very difficult to fill. As you say, power systems kind of grid connection type space has been just crazy for a few years now and doesn't
Yeah.
seem to be slowing down. Whereas I would say primary and as you say, transmission lines is just, over the past 18 months, 2 years is where it's really kicked in. And there's been a lot of demand on that front as well. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing, as I mentioned, is people coming from other industries. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of is people coming from overseas with, permanent residency or some type of visa already secured. I'm seeing a lot of that as well. But so these are some kind of options. But just generally speaking, what do you think some of the things that can be done to kind of address that kind of talent shortage? Is there anything that you could recommend or you have thoughts around?
Yeah, so we've recruited internationally for candidates and people as well, because there is a lot of there's the problem is it's just such a small pool in Australia, right? We haven't
Yeah.
built large greenfield transmission lines for decades. So the experienced people just aren't there, or not enough of them anyway. So yeah, it's really got to be that yeah, overseas recruitment, accelerating, fast tracking people's careers and development as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then also the sort of closing any gap to leverage cross market
Yeah.
skills,
Yeah.
a combination of everything.
One of the pushbacks that we see is around, understanding of Australian standards as well for overseas engineers and that type of thing, which always seems to be a gap to bridge when trying to kind of bring overseas candidates across and that type of thing. Is that a gap that you see is something that is quite large and needs time and a transitional period and that type of thing, or how do you see that from other countries and that type of thing?
There's definitely a bridge to gap, and that's a little bit the Australian industry has set
Yeah.
it up. So it's that way too. So we don't, design to international standards. We don't, it's even sort of a bit more parochial than that in each state. Utility will have their own design
Yeah,
standards
I've
as
heard
well.
that.
So it's not only you've got to have Australian experience, sometimes you've got to have Transgrid or Powerlink or AusNet or Western Power experience as well. So there is definitely a bridge to gap to bridge, but it's doable. And I think we found the best way is just to work on projects, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you're in a supporting role for the first project or two, but with that you'll learn. It's just designing to a different set of guide rails, right?
Yeah.
Framework, but the engineering is still the same.
Yeah, I guess as long as you understand it and you have that engineering process and mindset around it, then learning the standards should be, easily teachable to somebody that comes in, I
Yeah, and
guess.
if you can integrate one or two people each time into a team, rather than like if the whole team was like that, it would be really difficult. But
Yeah.
if you do it with one or two each time, then it's workable.
Yeah, and it can grow. And I guess that's needed not just by one or two companies, but by, everybody pretty much in the industry to make sure that there is enough people, because otherwise it becomes kind of a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation, and it's a kind of a merry-go-round. So there needs to be those new introductions of fresh people as well, I guess.
Yeah, because I think as an industry, we're not. It's a while off before we have a standardized or common design basis across all of the different regions. Yeah, that problem's not going to go away quickly, I don't think.
Yeah, no, it sounds like that. We often get told, as you say, they need a certain utility experience. The two utilities operate very differently and all that type of stuff. So no, it's definitely something I've heard in the market before. And I guess there is a, finite also number of companies in the industry doing each section. So whether it be the construction or engineering phase or whatever it might be. So there's also that kind of setting yourself apart piece as well. So, from an Oricon perspective, what have you guys done to kind of set yourselves apart in terms of, trying to attract people and make Oricon an attractive place to come and work?
Well, I mean, we believe it's the culture,
Yeah,
around the culture we have and the flexibility in the way we work. But ultimately, I think also for engineers, it's the projects.
yeah, of course.
And yeah, if you've got the cool projects, it's a lot easier to attract talent in that sense. And they are definitely the projects that we go after, are those projects that are technically challenging, um, and using the technical eminence of the team to solve those problems and work with the broader community and feasibility and all of the aspects of the business as well, I think is quite an attractive proposition for new starters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mentioning the projects thing, that's one of the biggest things that we always hear when the team's kind of speaking to candidates and that type of thing is, projects is the big one. Then what will I be working on is probably the key thing they want to hear about over most of the other things. Obviously, everything's important, right? But that seems to be the one, and especially when there's so many different projects to choose from at the moment, it's if you've not got one of those big name ones, then it's kind of harder to attract those people
and
as
I think
well.
the other thing that we've consciously done, which I think is and that's probably a reason more, maybe it's more why people stay, is that we don't want to do just detail design and DNC or just owner's engineer or just post delivery. Like, we liked to have roles spread across the whole life of the project, so you have the opportunity to work in feasibility, concept, working with environmental planning, comms team, our advisory part of the business in that really early stage project. Then you could see it through and could be owner's engineer, we could be client side technical advisor like we are for New England Res, or we could be detail designer like we are on Central West Arana Res. So we have a lot of variability, and you get to see the projects from all those different angles as well. Makes it interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's sounds like you guys got a lot on, to be honest, at the moment. So yeah, it's an exciting time. Cool. And I feel like just to kind of close things out, I wanted to do like a little quick fire few questions to throw at you just to kind of as I say, finish up and close things out. So first one would be, across the energy sector, one technology that you think we're going to hear more about over the next 5 years.
Synchronous condensers and gas turbines.
Interesting.
I gave you two.
Yeah, you did. No, I'm happy with that. And then one thing you'd love to see change in the industry.
I would really like us to be better in this early engagement and social license, and do a better job of explaining and working with the communities so that we all understand the common goal rather than kind of working at the communities.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Based on what you were saying earlier, I think that sounds really important. And I think if you can get that bit down pat, then it makes the rest of everything that's coming
easy.
a lot easier. So that makes sense. That makes sense. And then last one, more about you. If you weren't in energy, what do you think you'd be doing instead?
Always thought I'd be something more creative, like an architect or something a bit arty.
Okay. Artsy. Nice. I like it. I like it. Cool. All right. Well, no, that's kind of it, to be honest. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been really, really insightful. Really covered a lot of interesting topics, and I think anybody that listens will gain a little bit more information and industry expertise from what you've discussed. And I think there is, as you say, some challenges there, but some good ideas from your side on how to address them too.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. So the more people we can welcome into the industry and work together with, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, really appreciate your time, Renene, and thanks again for joining the GridCast. It's been fantastic. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Bye.
Cheers.